All right, here we are. Haight Street Voice chatting with the one and only Mr. Joel Selvin, who was my teacher at SF State a million years ago, and a great leader in keeping music alive, not only in the Bay Area, but all over the world. And probably the main reason that we're talking today is to talk about what do we actually call this corner building now? The Haight Ashbury Heritage Building?
The Doolin Larson Building.
Okay. All right. And what's going on? I know that I was there when it became a national treasure last year. And my question is, what is the intention? What are we trying to do? When are things going to happen? Where are we?
I can't really tell you too much about it. I haven't heard from those guys since that party.
Right.
The Heritage, San Francisco Heritage Group that took possession of this has a couple other properties that they've renovated, and one of them's that artist's home in the Mission District, and the other is the Haas Lilienthal House on Gough Street. Okay. They're beautiful examples of what they are, and the artist's house was sort of like designed to be a museum after he's left. So the Haas Lilienthal House, they run certain kind of programs in there. That's not really a really big, wide-reaching organization or anything. And this property came into their hands, and it's obvious it's a big deal building on the corner of Haight Ashbury, and it's been very well cared for.
Yeah.
So, what remains is for them to figure out what they want to do with it. They've got some artist in residence deal going on.
In fact, I literally just walked by there just now to get outside for a minute, and there is a painter that's living there. One of the
Jeremy Fish. He's no painter.
No, only because I haven't been out for a while because it's COVID. But I asked one of the street kids out there, and it's always because I told him I was going to talk to you, and he says, "Oh, is that the guy that's living in there right now?" I go, "No." And then I asked him, and he says, "Yeah, some painter guy."
Jeremy's upper playground.
Okay.
Don't you have upper playground in your wardrobe?
No.
Well, they're down on the lower Haight. They're a worldwide clothing company, kind of on the hip hop street art kind of thing. And Jeremy is no like slouch. I mean, he's a big fucking deal.
Cool.
And he's living upstairs there. He put up that piece of art that's in the window. I don't really know what the deal is with this artist in residence thing.
Yeah.
And McQuaid seems to be very much involved.
That's Peter McQuaid from the Haight Street Art Center, everybody.
Yeah, well, didn't you tell me he retired?
Yeah, that's what he did. I actually went down there. And I guess it was about 6 months ago.
Who's running the place now?
I forget the name. Some young person. I don't know the name, but yeah, Peter retired.
Wow.
Anyway, like you were going on about.
So they have a lot of issues if they want to create some kind of museum out of that thing. Mm-hmm. Public egress is really limited, so they'd have to build out a accessible staircase on the other side of the building. They'd have to have it would take they were saying they thought it was like a $2 million job, and I'm given to think they know what they're talking about, but I believe they were speaking optimistically, and it's probably more like a $5 million job.
Yeah.
And then what you've got is a thing that's right on the corner that, as you know, has real narrow hallways and real confined spaces. It's not an ideal sort of place for public events. Yeah. Although that attic room certainly could be very congenial. But yeah. the hallways are super small. The staircases are super small. The fire marshal would have a field day in there if it was going to be like some kind of public thing.
Yeah.
So I really don't know what they're going to do with it, and I don't believe they do either.
Well, but you were very involved. I mean, you're sort of the one that turned me on to it. Like, oh yeah, did you know blah blah blah? I mean,
yeah, I introduced him to Roger. My mistake.
Is it okay? This isn't live. Is it okay you said that?
I don't speak privately, you know. I mean, if Roger were here, I'd say the same thing. You know, I walked in there, I saw the place. I know Roger's got this place that's dying down at the end of the street where, you know, nobody knows that it's
I
there.
know.
And I saw, oh, wow, this is a satellite for that place. They could drive business back and forth between the two places like
Totally.
crazy. And it just seemed like totally, you know, wanted Roger right in on this right away. And so the next thing you know, Roger is like, you know, their guy, and you know, he's got all the money and he's got all the contacts. But you know, I got to tell you, that party you went to, that was my guest list.
It was a badass party too, dude. It was great.
I have a good guest list.
Were you at the morning thing? Were you at the news conference in the morning? No. See, I was there, and I got good footage of Ben Fong Torres speaking, and then Valley Brown spoke. And I think I might have told you that Valley Brown's people asked me for my footage rather than NBC or ABC. So it was a very exciting, you know, I mean, there was all these, the National Treasury was there. I mean, all these great supportive groups were there, and Sonny, of course, from Love on Haight, and you know, all the locals were very excited about it. So, I mean, the COVID didn't help. I'm sure that didn't help much, but you know, the COVID and the whole pandemic thing, but
hasn't helped anything except
no.
Zoom.
Well, it taught me how to learn how to use Zoom, kind of.
I don't know what they got there and what they can do with it. It certainly is a scintillating prospect.
Well, it's beautiful that it's not going to get turned into apartment buildings, or, you know, there's some crap or a gap or whatever, you know, at least we have that. And you knew that.
Well, I was on Haight Street yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like there was a war.
Well, I mean, yeah, all the shops are closed down.
Gone.
I mean,
Gone.
the Deluxe is going to probably close down.
The only places that were open were having huge sales.
Yeah. Love on Ganesha. She's doing fine.
Well, the tourist business is gone.
Yeah, the t-shirt shop's
the
gone.
neighborhood never developed any real authentic reason to be there. You know, and if you don't go to Amoeba Records, there's no reason. There's nothing to draw people.
Amoeba seems to be doing all right, though. Thank God. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is why I'm having this conversation with you, because I mean, my main intention with this magazine and everything is sort of like, everybody lives somewhere, right? Everybody lives in a community. You live in, well, you live where you live, but we should be able to walk down the street and you should know the people around you. Don't you agree? So this is about sort of like
knowing. The neighborhoods are kind of an old-fashioned urban philosophy or concept. You know, I mean, I don't know about you in Orinda, but when I was a kid, we played in the street.
Oh, yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
Well, although I do live on Page Street and they have closed it off and everybody's out there.
Well, that's why the closed off's a different thing. I mean, kids played in the street.
I know.
And we'd hear a car coming, we'd get out of the way, and the cars knew to look for it, kids. And play. That doesn't happen anymore. So neighborhoods are like a kind of antiquated philosophy. I mean, the Los Angeles, for instance, is frequently described as a collection of villages because it was built in that kind of peculiar way of clusters that connected by avenues. And the villages were, you know, in little communities in and of themselves. But you know, that's just not a thing in 21st century life.
Well, I guess what I'm speaking to is I've lived here, in the neighborhood 25 years. And I think it's important that, I mean, I think that people step over the homeless, you know, like, oh, that's just a street kid, fuck those people. Or, you know, sort of making sure that people are communicating. I guess that's my hope. That's my, you know, I interviewed a street kid on every one of these magazines, you know, on the back, I would have street kid spotlight, you know, and I guess I'm actually just kind of, besides the building I wanted to talk to you about, but especially with the COVID, I mean, we're all staying in touch via Zoom. Culturally, I mean, this was the Haight-Ashbury in the 60s, the 70s, the whole thing, the music, the blah, blah, blah. Do you have any sense of what you think is going to happen, or what we can
after the pandemic, après the deluge? No, it's a fucking mess.
Yeah.
None of those businesses on Haight Street are coming back. They're gone. And
Yeah.
all the small businesses are going to disappear. All the chains are going to be, still floating. And life is going to be materially different. I wonder who needs a downtown
I know.
when people are working remotely.
Yeah.
That Twitter building, that was Doug Shorenstein's life's project, rehabbing that Mercantile Mart and turning it into this fantastic modern office building. It's empty.
Yeah. Well, they're all moving to Austin, Texas, aren't they?
No, that's what's his name?
Oracle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here I am asking you questions, but I don't even really know what I'm asking you. I'm just, I guess what I'm saying is that I am glad that that corner building is safe. I just, what are we going to do with it? And even if it was open right now, nobody could go because of the COVID.
Well, they're a long way from doing anything with that besides having somebody live in it rent free.
Yeah.
It doesn't need a lot of structural work as is, but if they're going to have the public in, it needs a whole helping, heaping helping of it.
Yeah.
And it really is. I mean, the prospects of having a house like that open, I just did like kind of rough penciling on the whole thing and thinking about like what 1,000 visitors a day would be like. And that's not out of the question in the summer. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. People stop there all the time. And what's this place?
A substantial portion of the visitors who come to San Francisco to tour, a substantial portion go to that intersection just to see the intersection.
I know.
And there's nothing for them to do.
Well, there's a lot of street kids,
and Jerry's, and they can buy a bunch of crappy clothes.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to do. So that was something that the guys that owned Amoeba were super excited about, the Doolin Larson, because they felt like that the neighborhood was unanchored.
That's very true. That's a really good point. It is unanchored. I mean, you know what? Here's a good point. Since that McDonald's got closed down, they thought that was going to be a positive. It fucked everything up. Pardon my French people out there, but all those kids that used to go there to eat, for $1 for a meal, all those people are now wandering around. I mean, the scene got really ugly out here. It still is kind of ugly.
It's been ugly on Haight a long time, I especially at night.
Yeah. I mean, it's very true. But that McDonald's, they really thought that was going to fix up the neighborhood, and it kind of backfired, in my personal opinion. It was a place for those kids to go. So, I mean, I guess I also, speaking to you, having been a person who, not necessarily was here in the 60s, but that whole era of Jerry, here he is on Haight Street in 1968, walking down Haight Street, going to work. That's never going to happen again. I mean, yeah, that's just the truth of the matter. But there is a magic here. There is a reason people come here. There's a reason that people want to come here and be around it. It is a magical vortex of some sort. I guess I'm trying to speak to that. And
so those of us who saw the Haight in 1966, which I did, maintain fond memories of the utopian enterprise that was taking place. I remember being in the Free Store and watching a couple of elder black ladies, like not quite sure what to do. They like sort of like took the stuff and shoved it in their bags, like, okay, It was such a social laboratory and a social experiment.
Yeah.
That I think all of us who were there couldn't really be unaffected by it. It was just going on the sidewalks, and the psychedelic store, the psychedelic shop, the Thalen's place, the first head shop in the world. You can't imagine what that was like to walk into that place. And of course, the Free Store was, one of the diggers' jokes, and I had a bowl of their gruel once in the Panhandle, and then it was truly remarkable, and it curdled so fast, Linda, you can't believe it. By April, not even June, by April, The sidewalks were full with these miscreants and reprobates. It had nothing to do with the elevated consciousness that was being pursued the year before.
Yeah.
It was, oh man, free drugs, free sex. I'm there. Don't have to work. Don't have to do anything. I can just sit on the sidewalk all day and be high.
Yeah.
And by the end of the summer, the fucking meth had taken over.
Mm-hmm.
And meth had nothing to do with what psychedelics were about.
Yeah.
Psychedelics were a portal. They were a doorway. They were a consciousness raising device that was meant to create a community and raise everybody's consciousness to a point where we could evolve beyond the petty difficulties that the society was enmeshed in.
Right.
That was the thinking anyway, but it fell apart so fast I can't tell you.
How do you feel about the legalization of psychedelics that's starting to happen up in Washington? I guess it is now.
So Johns Hopkins initiated some experiments with it about 4 or 5 years ago, and those are the first clinical experiments with psychedelics that have been done in over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
It got just such a horrible bad name and was so undermined by the street market.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to touch it. Now, in California, and especially the Bay Area, the chemical was introduced by psychiatrists. Oscar Janiger and Murray Korngold had a Beverly Hills practice, and they were giving LSD to everybody they saw. Similarly, that spread up here, and there were guys like Leo Zeff and Jack Downing, who were pioneers in psychedelic treatment. They thought that this was a panacea that could solve so much of their problems, that one dose of this would change people's lives and affect them in ways that you couldn't reach them through talk therapy. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's where Kesey ran across LSD, was at mental hospital experiments at Stanford. Yep. And that's pretty much where it came from in California. It's from out of the psychiatric community. So there was no psychedelic culture, there was no psychedelic art, there was no psychedelic music, there was none of that surrounding it. It was just strictly a chemical used for inner exploration. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They thought it was pretty promising. And we've seen what's Ayelet Shabone's wife, Michael Shabone's wife, writing about microdosing, and that's been this big fad down in the valley. It definitely has effect on depression, and depression is impossible to deal with from any kind of really sound medical point of view. So, there's in the Scandinavian countries, they use psychedelics to treat alcoholics, and they find it enormously effective.
Oh, I don't doubt that whatsoever.
Single dose will do the trick, they say.
Yeah.
And they'll start opening up with more exploration of this and more laboratory work. Here's another thing about the Johns Hopkins stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, in a clinical setting, there's no such thing as a bad trip.
Really?
Yeah, no, they have no bad trips. There's no such thing in a clinical setting. Huh. They are all environmentally induced.
That makes sense. The fears that have been locked into your brain due to outside emotional
or the conditions under which you're taking the chemical.
Okay, the environment. Okay, gotcha. Oh wow, really? Mm-hmm. It's not just the demons in your head. That's kind of
no. They don't have bad trips in Johns Hopkins.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I would talk to Sunny, up at Love and Haight, and I did an article with her actually in Haight Street Voice about how, booze is more of a problem on Haight Street than drugs. I mean, of course, the crack is kind of the method.
Well, let's first of all distinguish. LSD is not a drug; it's a chemical.
Good point.
It doesn't depress the nervous system. It creates a chain reaction inside the bloodstream, and in fact is out of your bloodstream within 10, 20 minutes of ingesting it. So all that happens when you take psychedelics is something that's already in your system, and it just triggers this chain reaction. So it's much more of a chemical than a drug. And drugs have like deleterious effects, and you trade off, whatever the cost of the painkiller is versus the effectiveness of it, or the energy boost versus the whatever you have. It's been the history of drug use, of narcotics and drugs, that it leads to misery and melancholy. But the LSD does not have that thing. Nobody's addicted to LSD. People don't get violent on LSD, which happens all the time with drunks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned Sunny. Sunny's an amazing figure in the Haight-Ashbury.
She is.
And she doesn't get enough credit for being the spark plug to that community. She's single-handedly keeping a lot of stuff alive. And I'm real impressed with her.
She, with the COVID, has, they say, oh, you could keep your shops open. She's decided her online business is what she's really working on now. She says, I really don't want to, my employees, I don't want to endanger. She says, I don't really, she'll stay like, I think maybe 2 days a week she's open, but it's like 5 people at a time. She'd much rather have people come online and get her stuff, because of course she wants people at the store, but she really is being very, very careful about the COVID. She's a wonderful, she's
a treasure in that community.
She is. She had my book signing there. She really is. She's a lovely, wonderful person. She'll be my next interview.
I was at that book signing.
I know. I have a picture of us. A great picture. So what are you working on, Joel? What are you up to? Oh. Let's do a little Joel plug. Oh, wow. Hot off the press? Damn.
April.
Woo! Tell me a little bit about this.
It follows the University High class of 1958 through the very beginnings of rock and roll in Los Angeles. Wow. The people in that class included Jan, Dean, Nancy Sinatra, Bruce Johnston of the Beach Boys, a guy named Kim Fowley, who was figures in a lot of this stuff, a guy named Sandy Nelson, who had a couple of hit records and was involved in all this stuff. It was a very tight-knit little group in 1958, and then things start to happen and life goes on.
Wow. Well done. April, huh, you said? All right. Fantastic. That's great, man. So you got sick of San Francisco, went to LA, huh?
I've written this book about San Francisco. It's called Summer of Love.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Ensemble piece that covers a certain time period and has kind of arbitrary beginnings and ends. And then I wrote this biography of songwriter Bert Burns, and it really is the same thing. It's an ensemble portrait of the New York rhythm and blues scene from 1960 to 1967. And, Burns is the central character, but he's really the lens for this kind of ensemble portrait. And this book, Jan and Dean and over at Fairfax High was Phil Spector. And those guys were the beginning of rock and roll. Spector had a #1 hit when he was a senior in high school, and Jan and Dean were in the top 10 when they were seniors in high school.
Holy shit.
So all this sort of like spilled out into the community after they graduated. Spector went to New York, which is where the record business was. And then Jan and Dean grew the record business. And if you listen to the early Beach Boys records, you'll realize they were Jan and Dean imitators. The first record, Surfin', is kind of a knockoff of an old Jan and Dean record called Baby Talk. So all this Beach Boys start piling in, and then the Lou Adler is Jan and Dean's manager, and he ends up producing the Mamas and Papas. And California Dreamin' is a Beach Boys record inside out. It is. It's the same California mythology and the same California archetypes. Only he's cold in New York and wants and is dreaming of that. So all this whole thing of California as this promised land was kind of invented by these records. I mean, Disneyland had a lot to do with it, and Hollywood played a role in it. Oh, I forgot to tell you, who else was in that high school class at university?
Who?
Her name was Kathy Koner.
Oh.
You know who Kathy Koner was? Everybody knows her as Gidget.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly.
Her father wrote a little book about her being out at the beach. And
wow. Well, what a trip. Because the key word, what stuck with me there is you said, oh yeah, then they got out of high school and they went into the community and it's saturated and all blew up. That's not going to happen anymore, right? I mean, we don't have any communities for the music to seep out into anymore.
Well, the music is all a commodity now. In 1958, it belonged to the people who listened to it and who played it. Mm-hmm. And there were a few so-called adults who were making money off of it, who were organizing it. But it was literally belonged exclusively to the people who made it and listened to it. Mm-hmm. Now it's a big business and it's all out there, and there is no underground and there is no teen life, and it's a big mass media world.
Yeah,
those original records were, if they sold only in Los Angeles, that kept you alive, and your career was still going, and you didn't have to have big national hits. I can't do that.
Mm-hmm. What bands are you listening to these days? Well, what would you say? Here you are talking. It's not just Haight-Ashbury. You're talking to, everybody that's in their houses frustrated because of the COVID, and what's your words of wisdom to people out there? What do you want to say to people? If you've got 10,000
people. Well, I've advised everyone I know to just, cut as much slack to everybody as you can. Mm-hmm. These are really trying psychological times for all of us. Mm-hmm. It's super hard on young people and whose lives were in ascension and have been cut short without any idea of what happens next. And it's just time not to honk that honk in traffic, and time to go okay when they butt in line or whatever. It's just a very difficult time, and we need to all be bring out the inner hippie in ourselves.
There you go. Well, thank you, Joel, for being with me. I really appreciate it. I like that as an ending, and let's all bring out the inner hippie, even if we don't have any left on the hate anymore.
It won't go away.
Well, that's good, like a fungus.
That's one of the things that I learned.
The magic, if there is
writing
a magic
about this, was that it turns out that the Haight-Ashbury hippie is one of the most enduring American archetypes since the cowboy and Indian. That it's something that there's images of all over the world, and that is emulated and fantasized about. It was like the last heroic moment in our culture. Mm-hmm.
Having the flower in your hair and the whole thing,
whatever it was, it caught a zeitgeist that won't go away.
Thank you, Jerry.
He was one of them.
Love you, Joel.
Thanks, Linda.
You have screw the holidays. Have a beautiful, love you. See you out there somewhere, hopefully one of these days.
I hope so too.
Okay, much love. Peace.
Take care.
Bye.